When it comes to rare and expensive Skylanders, an option that's becoming much more widely accepted is the use of NFC cards. A lot of people buy NFC cards so that they can play as any rare and expensive Skylander for pretty much no money, except for obviously what you have to pay for the cards and the scanner itself. This video is going to be going over pretty much the pros and cons of using NFC cards and using figures for playing Skylanders. I think each of them do have some clear benefits and some clear drawbacks as far as how they affect the overall gaming experience and how convenient they are to collect. So that's going to be the premise of today's video, but let me get into a little bit more of the specifics. Just some background on NFC card information. It does stand for near field communication. I'm not a complete expert in this sort of technology, but I mean, your phone has it. If you put your phone next to a Skylanders portal, sometimes it'll pull up Apple Pay, and that's happened to me a bunch. So that's just the basic idea of it. So NFC cards, you can pretty much put any sort of data file on them, and then when you scan them with something with like an NFC reader, then it'll sort of scan and get the information from that. So that's how that works. So to start with NFC cards, there is some good to them. A lot of people obviously use NFC cards because it lets them find the files for any Skylander and put them on the card and use it as basically the Skylander. You can play as that Skylander without having to have the actual figure, and it's going to be much cheaper to actually have an NFC scanner and cards. I know the scanner is like not too expensive, but it's to the point where it's like I don't think I need to buy it for myself. It's like $50 or something. And then to get cards, I mean, you can get like 100 of them for like $20. I think cards are not that expensive. But of course, another benefit is you can always erase what's on the card and put something else. You can always change the data on the card. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with that. So you take your Skylander and you obviously just swap the files around, and then you're playing as a different Skylander on that same NFC card. So you can really play it no matter how many cards you have. You can always play as the entire Skylanders roster. Another interesting thing you can do with it is play as unreleased Skylanders and stuff like that. So you can, I'm sure you can find the files for the Yawn Traps and use those in Trap Team. I know that you can find the files for Vicarious Visions Windup and use that in any of the Swap Force, and I think the other games have it too. So there's a lot you can do with them as far as accessing like unreleased and really cool sort of secret hidden content that you will never be able to achieve with just figures. And then obviously the main reason people do it is because it's cheaper. To buy Robo is of course going to cost you over $300, Chompy Mage over $300, Wildstorm probably over $100 unless you get really lucky, and of course Blackout, Spotlight, Thrillapeter all around $100, and Echo and Breeze. There's so many that are super expensive, to the point where it almost becomes like very justifiable to say, hey, I'm going to buy a pack of NFC cards and I'm going to use them to play as these Skylanders. But then it's like, is it really worth it in the end? Like, how is your collection going to feel? But that's going to be for the cons later. Another quick pro is just the convenience overall. Imagine having a stack of 100 cards versus a stack of 100 Skylanders. Of course, you wouldn't be able to stack them up because they're Skylanders, but just imagine 100 cards next to 100 Skylanders. Cards are much more portable, much easier to handle, and of course the figures are going to be bigger. They're going to take up a lot of space, but in the end, what's going to look cooler? If you like how they look, then the figure's going to look much cooler versus a stack of blank white cards. So again, it's really up to you and how much you care about stuff like that. Okay, before I get to this next section, I do want to say I have nothing against people that use NFC cards. This is more just personally how I feel about them, because this is when the video is going to start to get crazy, because I'm going to talk about the bad of NFC cards, and this is really why I don't tend to use them. And the first thing I have is they completely ruin the magic of Skylanders. The whole gimmick is having this figure and placing it on the portal and then seeing that exact character in the game. When you use NFC cards, you're just stripping away what always made Skylanders special, what made it unique in the first place. That's one of my biggest issues with NFC cards, like for sure, is that once you use it, it's like Skylander's just never going to feel the same again. It's, you know how easy it is to replicate this data file that really has nothing to do with the actual Skylander or actual magic at all, and it's just data on a little card and a chip inside their base. So that's why, I mean, of course I'm old enough to understand how all that works in the first place, but it's still cool having the actual figure. It's so much cooler putting the actual figure on the portal versus taking an NFC card and placing it on the portal and using that in game. Again, I don't have any issue with people who do this. This is why I would never personally do it. Another reason is because then you're very likely to continue doing that in the future. Since that magic is already gone and you know how easy it is to play as any Skylander you want, you're probably going to solely start using NFC cards, where you just use an NFC card for every Skylander you want to play as rather than the actual figure, because it's more convenient again. So it's just like, I really don't get it. I feel like it's bad to go down that rabbit hole and then get sort of pulled in to this like group of, I don't want to like stereotype or anything, just people who are normally more like technological, like advanced, and they're smarter, they will use NFC cards because they realize how easy it is. Now, I'm into like electronics and I understand it and all that, but I still just want that original magic of Skylanders, which is why I don't personally use NFC cards, because then the defining feature of Skylanders is gone. It's like the coolest part is toys to life, and then you're just putting cards on a portal, and that's just weird at a point. Because what's cool, I like video games, so when I put in a normal video game that isn't toys to life, you can play that. Obviously, all you need is the disc and your console and the controller or whatever. When you play Skylanders, it's one of the few games that you have to plug in extra accessories to use. Now, when you use NFC cards, you're plugging in the extra accessories and putting cards on the portal rather than figures. So it's like you're going through all the extra work still, but you're not getting there isn't anything cool to see because there isn't any magic or anything. What's so cool about Skylanders is obviously putting that figure on the portal, seeing them in game, but obviously that requires all the extra setup with the portal and all that. Now, when you use NFC cards, it isn't any less work. It is just as difficult to put this card on the portal as it is to put a figure on the portal. But what do you get out of it? Nothing. The magic, it just isn't there. It doesn't feel the same. That's really my biggest problem with NFC cards right there. Now, this is where I'm just going to start pouring out my love for the Skylanders franchise. When you look at the actual figures, and we obviously look at the pros, the benefits, the pluses of having the actual figures and collecting them, obviously they look much cooler. I will stand by the fact that Skylanders figures are high quality figurines that I actually like displaying and I think look very cool, and I love having a massive collection of them. So many, like the ones from Trap Team and Imagineers and Supercharged especially, are just high quality, unique, big designs that feel cool, and I really like having a massive collection of them. And that's what's the most appealing about Skylanders, just having all these cool characters that you have the figure for that you can use in the game too. And of course, when you have all these Skylanders and you use them like normal Skylanders, the magic is there. The magic of putting them on the portal and seeing them in game. What was the main feature that made Skylanders stand out and made everyone want to play it is still there. It's still there, and you're always going to be able to do it and experience that, which is awesome. And another thing about the figures is that collecting them is so much more fun. I think there's two parts of Skylanders that are super fun. Obviously, playing the games is one, but another is collecting the figures. Even modern day, scouring the internet for the best prices, having them shipped to you and unboxed and have a new figure to add to your collection. I still love that rush of dopamine every time I get to do that. With collecting cards and NFC cards, it's never going to be the same, dude, because you have just all these cards at your disposal. You can do anything you want with, and you're never going to have that joy of collecting the Skylanders figures again. Of course, if you're still going to collect the figures but use NFC cards for convenience on the side, I can kind of understand that, but at the same time, there are other issues that arise with that, such as, again, it ruins the magic knowing that you can just put a card on the portal and that has the same effect as a Skylander, so it's up to you there. But as far as actually Skylanders go, of course, if you collect cards over them, or if you just have cards, you're not going to get that collecting experience. That is sort of what makes Skylanders so fun nowadays, because there's two elements to combining that create pretty much most of the joy that comes from it. One is collecting the figures, and one is playing the game, in my eyes. So when you use NFC cards, you're just completely eliminating one of those, which is really my biggest issue with it. And then the last thing is that if your passion is collecting Skylanders, by the time you complete your collection, you're gonna have so much value sitting there. Whereas NFC cards, if you just buy a pack of NFC cards and an NFC reader, it's really, you're just putting money into something that's just gonna sit there and it's really not gonna do anything. Whereas if you have a bunch of Skylanders, this point is kind of weird to make, but if you have a bunch of Skylanders, you have actual love for Skylanders, you have this collection of figures that's worth just tons of money, and you really have an experience behind each one. It's not just about the money, but it's about just the feeling of having these actual figures that came out in your childhood and you remember them. For the most part, so many people have a story locked behind each Skylander that they remember. I know you're not going to remember every single one, but just having those few figures that are super meaningful, NFC cards are never going to be able to replicate that feeling. Now, there are a few cons to figures, which I can understand, and of course this is going to be why some people gravitate over to NFC cards. Now, the first one is they do take up space. If you're someone who doesn't want to show them off and doesn't want to display them, they're likely going to be stuck in tubs, and then you're not really going to see them, and dealing with them is going to be a hassle, which I can understand. I can understand that it does take up space, but if you're a Skylanders fan, how big of an issue is this really going to be, and how much are you going to prioritize thinking about this as an issue over just having fun with the figures at the end of the day? I know it can be an issue, and I know that NFC cards very much alleviate that issue, but it's just having the figures, no matter if you display them or not, they are going to take up space. Now, another drawback that some people come to with figures is that their lifespan is low. Like, the actual NFC card will die much sooner than NFC cards that are still coming out today. Now, of course, this is true. For Skylanders, they're older, so they're not going to last as long. And of course, they're designed around this figure, so they're not going to be as, not sure what the right word here is, but NFC cards are just going to have a longer lifespan. They're going to be more sturdy in general. Now, as far as Skylanders dying, like, randomly, that is something that doesn't happen. Skylanders should last longer than your portals. So if your portals still work, none of your Skylanders have died. There was a test run at Activision where a Skylander was able to go through 20,000 scans. No, not 20,000. My bad. 20 million scans, and 3 portals broke before finally the Skylander stopped working. So you should not have to worry about this. If you had this issue, it is because there was a hardware defect with the NFC chip, and that's why your Skylander stopped working. That's the issue. It wasn't actually the mass-produced chips that were all faulty and all had a short lifespan, because that would suck. And Activision, I would think, is smart enough to realize, hey, if someone comes back to this game in 10 years and nothing works, then we were just selling these horrible products the whole time that are going to have no value in the future. So that is an issue, but I really don't think it's that big of an issue with actual figures. In the end, if you want to experience everything the games have to offer without spending much money, of course use NFC cards. That's the best way if you really don't care about the Skylanders magic. You're just a gamer who wants to get the most you can out of each game using, you know, not having to break the bank, obviously, then I think it's totally chill if you use NFC cards. But if you use physical Skylanders and still collect them, the experience is just completely different. If you're, I feel like, a real fan of Skylanders, all of it, the figures and the games, you'll see the beauty in still collecting the figures and having them all on display. Even if you don't have them on display, just having a big collection of them where each one has meaning. And each one, when you place on the portal, you feel that magic. So I personally will always say that figures are better. But of course, this is just my opinion. Don't get super mad at me, because I have said multiple times, I have nothing against people who use NFC cards. I just personally wouldn't. I think it ruins the magic, and that's why I will never use them. But if that is if you're older and that isn't something you really care about at this point, then I completely understand having NFC cards, so you don't have to break the bank to play as every single Skylander. But I do thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and of course, please don't flame me in the comments. I'm not trying to be too controversial, but I have heard that my channel is pretty controversial in the past. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.